Welcome to CharityVillage Connects. I'm Mary Barrell. Well, hot off the presses is the 8th edition of the Giving Report, published by CanadaHelps. In the 2025 edition, CanadaHelps looks at the time period of 2018 to 2024 to understand how giving has evolved during a period shaped by crisis and transformation. The COVID-19 pandemic and a series of major national and global disruptions have influenced how Canadians give and which causes receive support. To help us get an understanding of the key findings of the 2025 Giving Report, please welcome Aneil Gokhale, Director of Philanthropy at the Toronto Foundation, where he helps individuals, families, professional advisors, companies, and other organizations be more strategic with their philanthropy. He has also worked at United Way Toronto and GE Healthcare and is the chair of the Membership and Professional Advisors Committee for the CAGP Greater Toronto Chapter. Welcome to the podcast, Aneil.
Thank you very much, Mary. It's great to be here.
Well, in your mind, particularly from your perspective, what were some of the key findings from the 2025 CanadaHelps Giving Report that really jumped out at you? Were there any surprises this year?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I would say to this. One is one of the figures in the report really talked about the steady decline in the percentage of Canadians that were claiming donations on their tax returns, and that for me is interesting because I think it's directly connected to the way philanthropy is shifting, and I'd say particularly for younger audiences across Canada. There's been a real rise over the years in crowdfunding, in supporting mutual aid groups, non-qualified donees, and all of these methods or options that I've just mentioned are not traditional charities, right? So they're not going to give you a tax receipt in the same way that many Canadians would have been used to for a number of years. And so as a result, I think there's still a lot of generosity and giving happening, but it's happening differently. And particularly, I think the one metric that we can sort of count on and compare year to year to year is tax filing. And when giving changes, then the tax filing numbers are just going to change as a result. And so certainly that's one of the trends that we're seeing, especially I'd say with younger donors. I think older donors, sort of boomers, et cetera, civics are generally still giving in that more quote unquote traditional way, where they are counting the way on that tax filing and it's driving their behavior. But we're definitely seeing that difference. And then I know we'll get into this as the conversation unfolds, but the other piece that I was really encouraged to see was the rise in support of local initiatives. And that's something, obviously, working at a community foundation is very close to my heart. And I was really, really happy to see that trend in the report.
One of the key questions coming out of the report every year is giving in Canada is either increasing or decreasing overall. That's one of the measurements that is common to these reports. Based on this year's findings and what you see on the ground, how would you describe the current trajectory of charitable giving? What are your thoughts on whether the donor base is growing or continuing to shrink?
So I think as we stand today in 2025, hot off the press of this current report, the overall number of donors is continuing to shrink. But I think it's tied to some of the things I pointed out right off the top. And then also, I think it's just there are sort of fewer Canadians giving more, let's say. So what I mean by that is that the overall number of Canadians that are donating are certainly, unfortunately, trending down, and that's been continuing for 10 plus years now. But those that are giving collectively, the average sort of gifts that they're giving are actually higher numbers. And so it is a troubling trend, though, because, as less and less folks year over year are kind of involved in organized philanthropy, then I think you start seeing what's the word I'm looking for? You start seeing sort of fraying at the local and societal level when people are less engaged. And so I definitely want to see a shift there over time. One of the other trends is while we see that the numbers are in decline overall, that the piece that I'm seeing more in incline is this trend towards trust-based philanthropy and ideas like giving unrestricted, giving multi-year. These are concepts that are kind of becoming more normal, and that for me is something that I'm really happy about, because for a long time there's been a lot of trends around, well, I as the donor know what's best, and I'm going to give this way because that's what it should be. And I think what that does is it really erodes the trust that needs to be built between the donors and the organizations on the receiving end. Typically, the organizations on the receiving end are closest to the needs that they're trying to solve, and therefore know what they need the money for. And so this idea of unrestricted giving is something that I think is really critical, and I'm happy to see trends in those areas on the upswing.
I think what you're referring to in some instances is a charity or a foundation giving to a non-qualified donee, for example, that is on a relationship basis, more trust based and less restrictions, and for longer periods of time. Is that what you're talking about?
That is definitely part of what I'm talking about, Mary. I would say, examples for sure what you're talking about there, and what changes in the Income Tax Act have allowed for more of this opportunity. I think what we've understood, especially since the pandemic, is a lot of the community need that's happening and that needs to be supported is happening at levels where in communities across this country, in smaller areas, the ability to actually go down the road of setting up your own charity and having a board and all of that process, like there's a lot involved there. And I think for a lot of grassroots groups, it's just not possible. They're just focused on like getting the work done and solving the needs and helping the people. And I think that's where some of the changes that have happened over the years have really allowed for more of that work to happen. And trust is at the center of it.
I know that you are committed to diversifying philanthropy and making it more inclusive. What are some promising approaches or models you're seeing that are helping to expand the donor base, especially to include Canadians who may not see themselves reflected in traditional philanthropy?
Hmm. That's a really important question as we see Canada continue to diversify. And we see this across all sectors, but absolutely it's critical within the philanthropic space. And this applies, Mary, to giving of money, but also of time. And so I think it's important. And what we've been seeing and doing at the Community Foundation here in Toronto is we've always said that philanthropy needs everyone. And over the last several years, we've been very deliberate about inviting younger donors, younger Canadians, and more diverse Canadians and Torontonians to join us in that idea of giving back. For a long time, if you looked at the boards and the donor walls of many of the largest organizations across this country, you'd see kind of similar names, similar genders, similar racial backgrounds, and while a lot of organizations have benefited from a lot of that generosity, I think the challenge is as we continue to evolve as an organization, or as a country, sorry, and then particularly in Toronto, where greater than 50% of Torontonians are foreign born, the demographics are changing in this country. And so, being able to connect with this changing diaspora and invite them into places that maybe previously weren't as welcoming, but certainly now are more so in some cases, I think is really important. At the Community Foundation, the main thing we do is we work with individuals and families around donor advised funds. And one of the ways that we've tried to make this more accessible is by lowering the threshold to start a fund, so making it more accessible. We've really been at the forefront of co-creating learning journeys. And so that sounds kind of jargony, but what I would say, and the way I try to describe it is we really try to, um, you know, the act of setting up a donor advised fund is very transactional. You give money, you get a receipt, and then now you have an account that you can give from. But I think what's really critical, and the way to think about it is that as a community foundation, we're sitting on a ton of knowledge and networks that are really important to mobilize and share with philanthropists so we can educate them and allow them to make more impact. And more newer Canadians, younger donors are looking for that kind of engagement because for them, philanthropy isn't just check writing. It isn't just, kind of me of wealth want to give to you, the needy, but it's like, I care about my community and I want to be part of making it stronger for all of us. That's including me and everyone else around me. And so partnering with an organization that can help on that learning and understanding is really critical. And I think just overall, younger donors in particular, when we think about philanthropy, while the gift is important and that sort of connection to community is important, I think also there's a bit of selfishness as part of it too. It's about networking. It's about building our own capacity. And for a lot of us, especially younger Canadians, as we start working, um, as we start families, all these kinds of things, we don't meet as many new people in our lives from day to day, right? And so philanthropy, volunteering, giving, these are places that you can start connecting with like valued, like thinking people, and magic happens as a result. And so those are some of the things that we're seeing.
Well, this may be related to some extent in what you've been describing, but how can we better engage Canadians in philanthropy who may not consider themselves wealthy, who maybe actually just be beginning to build their lives? What messages or funding models seem to resonate most in broadening participation among not just younger, but those who may not be the wealthiest people in our societies and in our communities?
Yeah, what I would say on that is I think it's really important to sort of really underscore and understand that whatever amount of time or money is more than zero, and it's important to get started and do something that fits with your lifestyle and what you want to be doing as a Canadian. And so I think, as a community foundation, we're focused on deepening Torontonians' commitment to giving back now, but also in the future. And so I think the way we think about this is we want to engage people at the level that's right for them at the moment, but then we want to grow with them and we want to give them pathways to sort of see, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. I can do more. I can find out more, and I want to learn more. And so it's kind of like whatever the gateway is to get somebody in, and then you start building on that. And sometimes it's the network, it's the organizations, it's the community, but it's like finding whatever's going to resonate for that person, and really kind of doubling down on that. There's some ideas too. There's like the concept of pooled giving. So sometimes when you think about the impact you can have by giving by yourself is one thing, but all of a sudden, if you can pool your donation with 10 other folks that are inclined to support something similarly, all of a sudden that's now 10x supporting whatever that initiative is. And so that's the kind of thing where, you've heard of people doing like birthday campaigns where they say, hey, I don't need gifts anymore, but consider, for my birthday this year, if you'd like, I'm supporting this local nonprofit that's helps a lot of community members, and I'd love to encourage you all to do that too. And all of a sudden, somebody has this great birthday party, and then before you know it, $1,000, $2,000 has been given from all the guests at this party. And it's kind of a neat way to involve your network in something that you want to prioritize and that you care about. So pooling, I think, is an example. I think the idea of supporting smaller grassroots organizations is really critical. When I think of areas of giving in this country like education or healthcare, first and foremost, I think for a lot of us, we'll automatically think of our alma mater, or we'll think of the local hospital where we've gone for care, or a family member has gone. And those large institutions in our communities across the country are really critical and so important, and do the research, and they put us on the map, and they help so many of us. But I think it's important to remember that, like, when you think of that sort of ecosystem of giving, somebody, especially a younger donor or a newer donor, if they've got, $1,000 or $100 to give, that gift at a large institution, of course it's important, but the like, compared to all the other gifts they're getting, it's just the impact's going to be different. Whereas if you find a local, homework club or a local community health center, you have an opportunity for that gift that quote unquote is smaller to have more impact because it's at the grassroots level and it's going to support that much more kind of right in the weeds. And so something that we really try to get our donors thinking about is that ecosystem of giving, the large organizations, the small organizations, the ones in between, and to really show what that sort of breadth and depth can look like. I think that's a really important piece of it. And then finally, I think the other piece is around legacy and wills. And so, the stats around the percentage of Canadians that have wills, but then the percentage of those wills that actually have named a charity, like the numbers are really low. And so I think for a lot of us, just even that simple act of like thinking about, well, maybe I'm not in a position to do a today gift, but I certainly could set myself up to be in a position to do a tomorrow gift. And what could that look like? And so I think if people are starting thinking that way, over time, things can evolve and change and you can get more involved. Maybe you do more volunteering now. And then as you become a bit wealthier, you can start thinking about the money side of it. But that's kind of a piece. And I know I'm sort of going on and on, but there's one more thing that I just thought of that I think is important too. A neat way, and I've done this personally, so I'll share this from personal example, but something my wife and I have done for a number of years now. We're a monthly donor to a number of organizations. It's upwards of 7 organizations now that we give to monthly as a family. And that for me is a really great way to start at a level that feels right. Think of it this way, right? Like many of us have Netflix subscriptions, Spotify subscriptions, you name it. What about adding a donation as a monthly subscription in your wallet, in your budget? And so thinking of it that way, like the same way I want entertainment from my Netflix or Spotify, I also want to build community with my monthly donation to a local organization in my city. And so that could be a neat way to kind of get started. And before you know it, like every year at tax time, I look through my slips and I'm like, holy cow, like we actually gave quite a bit. And it's just because these monthly gifts grow and add year over month. And by the end of the year, it's a bigger number. And so those are some ideas. Hopefully those give you some examples.
Yeah, great examples. And I'm a strong believer in monthly gifts too, because you can spread it out and you don't feel it quite as much, but I also like the reinforced messaging of the impact that I've been able to make because of that. And I think that's really a significant part of the communication strategy for a lot of the charities that I've been supporting. One of the bright spots in the report was around the gift of securities. How can organizations more effectively educate donors and capitalize on gifts of securities, especially in the current giving climate?
Yeah, this is an important one for sure, and there's a couple pieces here that I think are important to underscore. So one, um, many organizations have gift of securities strategies and policies, and they're all set up to do it. But if I think of a lot of the smaller organizations, they just don't have the same infrastructure to take that on. But they should definitely know or remember that there's partners out there that are willing and able to help them. Most notably, CanadaHelps. CanadaHelps has a whole platform for gifts of securities that takes care of all the back end, and the charity is simply the recipient at the end of that gift. And so that makes it really seamless and easy for a lot of organizations to kind of get this taken care of. The other potential partner that here is your local community foundation. So here in Toronto, we offer this, but all of our peers, 200 plus across the country, many of us do gifts of securities as well, and are able to really be that in between to help a local organization process that gift and get the money where it needs to go. The other thing, so sometimes I think, okay, so this is kind of just an aha I've had over the last little while. I work in a space in my work at the community foundation where I make it I meet individuals and families who are thinking about more organized, strategic ways of kind of doing their giving, right? And sometimes it's at big numbers, 6 figures, 7 figures. And I gotta say, I'm still shocked at how many people I talk to from time to time that don't know that this is a strategy they could consider. And I'm just like, what advice are they getting, or who's talking to them? So that for me is a disconnect. And so the more organizations can be talking about this, and then of course on the wealth management side, on the financial planning side, on the estate planning side, a lot of those professionals, and I have a lot of relationships with estate lawyers, investment professionals, accountants. Many of them have this knowledge as well and are sharing it. So, like, the knowledge is out there, the examples are out there. So, on Toronto Foundation's website, for instance, we have a one pager that talks about the benefits of donating securities and walks you through an example. We're very clear to say we are not tax experts. We are not giving advice here. This is simply for illustrative purposes. So, every Canadian considering this strategy should absolutely talk to the professionals that they work with to ensure that it's the right strategy for their needs. But it's an important one for more and more Canadians to consider. Two other points on gifts of securities that I think are important. One that I heard recently that I think is really interesting is, there's a lot of folks that as as the world continues to evolve, there might be companies for whom they might hold some stock that, as things play out, maybe they're finding that they're just not as aligned with company X as they once were. Changes have been made. The way that a company goes about their business, the things they're saying, they're just not really agreeing with it anymore. So a strategy that I've heard some folks doing recently is actually liquidating those shares as a kind of almost like a bit of a protest, let's say, and taking those funds and then doing charitable good with those funds, but then basically divesting themselves of those securities. And so that's kind of a thought that somebody might consider when they think about their portfolio of investments and what they want to do with that portfolio as it continues to grow and evolve and change. The other thing I think on the in terms of gifts of securities is a gift of assets, so a gift of securities can have, like, what it is not is it's not a gift of income of kind of your day-to-day assets, or sorry, it's not a day-to-day gift. It's more of a future gift in terms of your assets. And so if you are feeling the pinch like a lot of Canadians are right now, but you also understand the need in community and want to make an impact, maybe it's hard for you to directly affect your pocketbook today by making a donation from your checking account or your credit card. But instead, if you've got some assets and maybe they're sitting in a brokerage account and they've kind of grown for a number of years and you're just kind of sitting on this gain, well, there's the whole strategy where you can consider giving those. You don't pay tax on the gain, and then all of a sudden you've made a gift to a charity that you deem to be important. And so that's a strategy to really consider, especially in the current economic conditions where giving is something that people want to do, but they may not have the disposable income to do it in a way that they want to.
That's all really fabulous information, and I think it's really important to remind people the myriad of ways that they can actually do give with securities. And that's really helpful information. I'm just going to have to look at what I'm holding and what I've been holding for years. One of the highlights of this year's report was the rise of local and regional giving. Given that your work at the Toronto Foundation and focus on just the city of Toronto and that communities in it, which is made up of many, many unique communities, can you tell us about what you're seeing at the Toronto Foundation when it comes to local giving trends?
Absolutely. And I alluded to this off the top, but for me, local is so key. I'm proudly a born and raised Torontonian, and I have the great privilege and honor of working at the Toronto Foundation in this work and working with my fellow neighbors and sort of Torontonians to do more good. And something that Toronto Foundation has been known for a number of years, 20 plus years, in fact, is our vital signs research. And that research has really, it it opens a lot of eyes to the needs in our city and what's going on and ultimately how folks can get more involved and kind of be part of the solution. Um, while we've been doing this research year over year and producing reports and whatnot, it's interesting. So this past year, when we launched the most recent Toronto's Vital Signs report, we shared a stat, and this stat really it garnered the most attention we've ever received in any of our reports in all the time we've been doing it. And the stat is that 37% of Canadians experience loneliness up to 3 days per week. And that statistic, I think, really speaks to it's connective tissue for a lot of this conversation that we're having today around giving, around being involved in your local community, around just kind of having that focus. And I think what we're trying to do is we're really trying to kind of, while that stat is kind of the start of it, it's really like, what do we do as a result of that? And how do we create more opportunities for people to lean in and be part of the solution? And so I've talked a lot about giving locally, connecting locally, like these are all really important things. I think something that, and this is kind of bigger than giving, but it's really for all of us to be finding ways to be more connected locally, right in community. And I think for me, the important thing there is to understand that the more we know each other, particularly our neighbors, but not exclusively, the more we build trust with one another. And there's this concept of social capital, and so there's it's a bit of a thinky kind of topic, but at the end of the day, what it comes down to is this ability for each of us as humans to build connection with other humans that we can ultimately trust and build and grow rapport with. In a city like Toronto, as big as we are, we can sometimes feel really isolated, right? Because we're kind of just in our silos, where we're going from our dwelling to our work, or we work from home all day, and like it's just, you can kind of just become in this tunnel. And I think this idea of getting involved, being involved as much as you can, it really can make a difference. And I get it as well. What I'm saying can be really hard for a lot of people who are just trying to make ends meet and can't, like, they're just hustling to do one job, maybe two, maybe three, and they can't even take care of their own families. And so like, don't for a second think that we're not thinking about that side of this. But what I'd like to see more and more is, from a philanthropic perspective, is people supporting the ability for more people to come together. And so one of the things around philanthropy that I often think about is this concept that philanthropy can actually, like, a lot of people think of philanthropy and they think of it very personally. What am I personally connected to? What do I personally care about? What are my values and how do they align with my giving? And I think more and more, what I want people, especially people, let's say more affluent or people of means, I want us thinking about what's the impersonal thing or the unconnected thing that, like, I can be supporting that actually doesn't impact my day to day, but will have a huge impact on others day to day that are kind of in my city, in my orbit, but not directly connected. And I think the more we can lift up those other pockets, you can start seeing kind of like, it's that whole what's that saying? Rising tides lift all boats, but it's I think that's a saying, but it's kind of like just lifting everyone up together. Because if we're only thinking about ourselves, the challenge is that we're not looking kind of at the bigger picture, and that for me is a really important piece when it comes to this idea of supporting community.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm curious whether you could explain what this shift towards local giving can mean for nonprofit organizations, especially for those who may not have traditionally focused on cultivating local donors.
So for me, I think what it comes down to is trust. I mentioned that word earlier. I think the more that uh, local organizations are kind of building and connecting with local people in their community, the more trust can be built because you can see directly what's going on. And excuse me, often one of the best ways to build that relationship is to start with the idea of volunteering. And so if there are opportunities for an organization to open their doors and allow people in to see the work happening, to sort of like showcase what's going on and the impact it's having, I think more people can be kind of like, oh, I didn't even realize that was going on just down the street from me, and want to get more involved and enable more of that. I also understand and appreciate that it really depends on the type of org and the services they are providing. Some are not really you know, just by nature of what they do, if they're a shelter or something, like you're not just going to open the doors and it's not a free for all. So I get that there's sort of that challenge there that needs to be navigated. I think the other interesting thing that I'm seeing more of is local organizations partnering with other organizations in community as well. And so I see this often with youth serving organizations. So I'm on the board of Visions of Science, a local organization here in the city focused on STEM and access to STEM, particularly in underserved communities. And what's neat with our organization is that the work that we do in STEM with young people, there are neighboring organizations, Lay Up Youth Basketball, Shoot for Peace, that are doing their important work with communities that they serve, but there's a lot of overlap in the youth that we serve collectively. And so all of a sudden, if a donor is giving to one, they can actually be supporting multiple organizations, because sometimes organizations will come together and make like a joint ask. And that can be really interesting for a donor to think, oh, my one gift can support multiple things in my community. That's a neat thing to consider. And so that's something that I'm seeing some trends more of. And I think that would be an entry point for a lot of organizations to consider, who are the organizations in my orbit that I could actually potentially partner with and you know, deliver shared service, but then also be on the receiving end of shared revenue.
Well, you know, I think that that's one lesson that the pandemic did teach us for the better among nonprofits, right? Is that that really kind of accelerated that willingness to start partnering with other organizations that had previously may even have thought that they were in competition for the same donation dollar. But go ahead.
Sorry, Mary, I was just going to say, and one other thing I was just thinking about was, so at Toronto Foundation, one of the things we've been doing, and we've published now, I think we're into year 10 of this, but we have a resource on our website. If you Google Toronto Foundation and Good to Give Guide, you'll come across essentially what we describe as a giving catalog. And so I say we're at about year 10. So you can see all the past issues, but what you're going to find there is a list of between 25 and 30 local grassroots organizations that have applied for and ultimately received funding from the Community Foundation. And we each year we pull together a group of past recipients of grants and community members who are front line and evaluate the applications and then ultimately decide and make those choices. But what's great about this resource is now all of a sudden there's this list of organizations that have been vetted, that are local, that folks can go to and say, oh, I didn't realize this was happening right in my community. I want to support that, or I want to learn more about this. So my wife and I, as just a very simple example, we have a donor advised fund. And every year with our kids, we use that Good to Give guide as the vehicle to get them thinking about which organizations our family wants to support this year. And so that's kind of a tool that exists. And, you know, that's one tool at one community foundation. But think of your local United Way. Think of CanadaHelps and their giving funds. Think of Ontario Trillium Foundation or the Ontario Nonprofit Network. There are lots of networks out there that offer these kinds of opportunities. And so those opportunities exist for people to learn about the giving opportunities and to then give, especially locally, because those opportunities are out there for all of us.
We kind of mentioned this off the top, but you know, certainly you can't miss it every day that you listen to the news or check out your newspaper. That we are facing some extraordinary economic challenges as Canadians. And given the economic uncertainty many organizations, which will ultimately also face them, what advice would you give to nonprofit leaders about weathering the financial ups and downs while keeping donors engaged?
This is really really critical. I think what I would say to nonprofit leaders, first and foremost, is um, don't do it alone. And so, what do I mean by that? I think for me, it comes down to partnership, and partnership is based on trust. And so, if you as an organization are kind of just in some silo doing your work and just kind of heads down, going hard, um, you're probably having good impact, but at a certain time in the future, that's going to become problematic and harder. And so, what I would suggest is whether it's your local community foundation, whether it's a local organization that's near you that's doing adjacent work or complementary work, I think it's thinking about these partnerships because ultimately, what that's about is diversifying revenue streams and thinking about different ways that you can continue to grow. So, we think of government funding, we think of corporate funding, we think of individual funding from individuals as people, but also as like private foundations. So there's lots of different inputs, but I think organizations have to look at their incoming and think about, well, how does that mix? How is that working for us? Is there an area that we want to lean into more, or maybe we're too heavily weighted in one area, and if something changes drastically, all of a sudden we're going to be stuck. And so it's thinking about that diversification. I think particularly for smaller organizations, one piece that's really critical to wonder about is reserve funds. And so a strategy that we've been really looking at the Community Foundation, and we do this right now at Toronto Foundation with about 20 organizations locally, but we're planning to kind of be more open with how we do this and offer this, is this idea of pooling your investments. So all of a sudden, if you're a charitable organization and you've got a small reserve fund, $50,000, $100,000, and you've got it's maybe you've just got it invested right now at the local bank. You've got somebody on the board that's supporting that work. You're probably paying retail, and you're probably just like not getting much service, and you're just another customer. And I think it's important. In the case of community foundations like us and others of our peers, a little known fact is that we all offer this kind of service from a pooling perspective. And so what an organization can do is they can then take advantage of the offering of Toronto Foundation, this idea of pooling as a way to build that wealth and take advantage of tools that are already in place. We've got the infrastructure, we've got the investment committee, the investment policy, and there's a proven track record. And so that's the kind of thing that I think could be worth exploring for a charitable organization. And there's different types of endowments and reserves too, right? Because some organizations, the idea of an endowment would be great, but in actuality, they're just not at a level where they can really think about an endowment in the truest sense. So all of a sudden, then it's more of, well, I have a reserve fund that I'm going to treat like an endowment, but I need to know that I could still access it if, something happens and I need that. And so this is where new products are on offer, and we've got a couple complementary products that can do these. But I don't want this to come across as like a sales pitch, but at the same time, I want people to know, particularly nonprofit leaders, that partners exist out there to help them do more with their assets. And I think when you think of working with a partner like a community foundation, there's a couple pieces here, right? Where yes, you will pay some fees, but those fees are helping a charitable organization continue its mission as well. The other thing is at least at Toronto Foundation, we have a strategy that is focused on socially responsible investing. And so all of a sudden, as a charity, I think it's really important to think about, well, what are your assets doing in the market? You're doing all this good on the one hand, but then if your investments are not doing so much good on the other hand, then, are you kind of thinking about how does that align with your values? Well, when you partner with someone like us, you're really aligned on that investment side, and then also on the actual delivery of service and impact side. And so that's an important piece. And so, yeah, that would be one important example I would share, Mary.
Yeah, that was really a fascinating sort of overview of how uh, organizations can look at the capacity to be able to work with community foundations to be able to partner and the strategies around that, and really helpful. Thank you. I want now to wrap up our discussion. Finally, looking ahead, what gives you hope about the future of philanthropy in Toronto and across Canada? What's one thing you'd like to see more funders and nonprofits doing in the next few years?
Just one, Mary. I Here's what I would say. I
You don't
it's
have to give me just one.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I mean, I've said lots of things during this talk, and so what I would say is I think I'll underscore a couple things and just reiterate them. But let me start here. So Toronto Foundation as an organization is we've been around since 1981. Our mission has been the same: to connect philanthropy to community needs and opportunities. What has changed most recently with our newest strat plan is our vision. And what's interesting is for a long time, Toronto has been sort of described as a city of neighborhoods. And I think what we want to really be thinking about is how can we shift from being a city of neighborhoods to a city of neighbors? And I think that's really critical because ultimately it means that we're all in this together and we're all supporting one another to make it better for all of us. And that's really, really important. And like I'm an optimist at heart, and these days it can be really difficult and hard to be an optimist. And you watch the news, you read the headlines, and like there's a lot going on. But I know for me, I just think about what can I do, what can I control, and what positivity can I foster and grow. And the more I think that way, the more I think and hope that's rubbing off on people around me, people I know, but also people I don't know. So it's, as simple as those random acts of kindness. And I know sometimes this might sound so basic, so trite, but I think it's just it's building blocks. It's like it's a ladder that just it's one rung at a time, right? And it's how we have to be thinking about this positivity, because I said it, we're all in this together. And so there's as much as you might have your life, your home, your family, and you're focused that way, and I get it. For a lot of people, it's really hard to focus anywhere else but those things. There's a lot of us in this city and in this country that have the luxury and liberty of focusing beyond just ourselves. And I think it's really important that we do that. And so the more we can do that, the more we can be thinking about people beyond ourselves and our immediate circles, I think the better off we're all going to be. And so, while I don't want to, what am I saying here? I want people to think beyond themselves, because it'll actually help yourself over time. And so while having a kind of I don't love this word, but having a sort of a selfish strategy, it feels very pigeonholed. The flip side of that is when you have more of an open strategy, you're helping everyone, but you're also making the conditions around you better for you and your family too. And so like it sort of lifts everyone up. And I think that's the important message I want to share here. And so this idea of shifting from or shifting to become more of a city of neighbors is something that has that feeling of really connecting folks beyond just kind of where they are, but thinking more broadly and ultimately improving the lives of everyone in the community.
Well, Aneil, thank you so much for the important work that you do, what the Toronto Foundation does, and sharing your insights and advice with our listeners. There is a distinction between a city of neighborhoods and a city of neighbors. And you said that so eloquently. And I believe in that message of lifting us all up. Thank you for joining us on Charity Village Connects.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.